Hey guys, my name is Chris from Jughead Gaming, and I would like to welcome you to a very special episode of the PSVR chat show. Here today we are going to be talking all things 3dRudder along with some amazing developers that are bringing PSVR rudder support to you.
And thanks for joining us, guys. We're going to have a 3dRudder to give away at the end of the show today and a bunch of other games, so stay tuned and enjoy. Thanks for coming.
And for those of you at home who do not know what the 3dRudder is, here's a little video for you to set things straight.
So just what is this hoverboard thing and how does it work? Well, the 3dRudder is a motion controller that you control with your feet. The 3dRudder is a comprehensive 360 degrees motion solution with 4 axes of movement and independent speed control. In practical terms, the 3dRudder allows you to move in a 3D space with all movement controls placed at your feet where they belong, keeping your hands free to do hand-type things. In a standard full locomotion game, the rudder gives you the ability to walk, run, turn, and strafe with only subtle movements from your feet. In fact, with its touch-sensitive deck, you can even control vertical movements with just a lift of your foot.
Again, welcome everybody to a very special episode of the PSVR chat show, and welcome to our very unique 3dRudder themed stage. And it's at this point in the show where I would like to take this opportunity to introduce someone very important to the PSVR chat show. That is Jason Livin, the producer of the PSVR chat show, and one who brings some unique sensibilities and insights into the whole 3dRudder conversation. Jason, thanks for joining us.
Hello. All right, for the rudder, it means something extra special to me because I have issues with my cervical. I have from my C5 to C6 and C6 to C7, I have issues there. Sometimes it's hard for me to move my arms around. Also for myself, I have dual sciatica, so sometimes it's hard for me to control one half of my body, one leg. It gets very difficult at times. So for me, the rudder means something extra special because it allows me to play games on a different thing. Not only for me does it mean something completely different as far as gaming is concerned, and I know for others it's the same thing. It's changing their game. For me, it's especially changing mine because you're allowing me to be able to play games still without, maybe I'm having a bad day, maybe I'm not able to move half of my body. I'm still able to play games and play with my buddies out there, and that means a lot to somebody like me. For I know it's going to be different for each person.
And our first guest over on my right here is Jacob from Carbon Studios, a lead game and level designer. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
So for those who are maybe not familiar or have not had the pleasure of playing the Wizards, can you please tell us about your creation?
Sure. So The Wizards is a VR spellcasting game in which you take role of a young apprentice who needs to stop the invasion of orcs. That's invading Meliora, and the gist of the game is that you actually use the spells with your own hands. You cast them, you throw them, and use your hands to do all the magic in the game. So the better you are as a wizard with your hands, the better you can do the game and can explore the world.
Awesome. Were you at all inspired by Doctor Strange, or is this more from previous history in fantasy?
Actually, when we asked this question internally, everyone gave a different answer. Some people pointed at Doctor Strange, some at Harry Potter, some at Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. So we took all the best from all other wizards that are out there in the pop culture world.
Very cool. Well, it was very well done. What does the 3dRudder, I guess, specifically bring to the wizards and ultimately to the PSVR gamer?
So as I mentioned, our game is heavily based on your hands and using them to cast spells. So you can use your legs to maneuver while you are in combat. So when you're facing orcs, you can actually use the 3dRudder to move around and focus your hands on killing them with your ice bow, fireballs, and all other spells. So this really helps out to coordinate your hands and legs in the game. And since the PlayStation Move controllers are a bit restricted on the control side, the 3dRudder is perfect to control the character in the game.
Absolutely. Jason, I'll get into this a little bit in a little more detail, but yeah, it's definitely a game changer in the Wizards. As far as implementation goes, from a technical standpoint, how did you find that process of implementing the 3D rudder into your game?
The process was actually quite simple since we already had a head start from the PC version in which we also implemented 3D Rudder. But even without that, the implementation is rather painless and quite easy. The only thing we had to consult was the specific movements, if the speed of turning and moving forward and sideways is right for the guidelines set by 3D Rudder. So it was just tweaking those options so everyone has a perfect experience using 3D Rudder.
My final question to you would be, Jacob, as a gamer, how has your experience been using the 3D rudder with the Wizards?
Oh yeah, so it's just perfect for the hand combat since I just can walk around with my feet and throw spells with my hands. So it adds up to the freedom of control within the game. So I'm really satisfied with the 3D rudder.
Well, yeah, and you've done an amazing job of it. So on that note, thank you, Jacob, for joining us for our 3D Rudder themed episode. And again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for bringing us rudder support to the Wizards.
Yes,
Sure.
appreciate it.
All pleasure.
And jumping into our personal experiences of the Wizards, Jay, I would say that of the early lineup of games, the Wizards was probably my favorite utilization of the rudder. Not to take away from any of the other amazing games and experiences with the rudder, but the Wizards has two things going for it. One, an absolute need for it because it's got so much hand gesturing. And when you're in combat situations, it's just game changing that I can do all of this stuff and not have to like worry about throwing a hand backwards. Because a lot of times I did spend the game backpedaling to get away and like trying to shoot off. And so different, so different. If you watch any PC gameplay, you could see that everyone was like running around like mad people and conjuring away. And we couldn't do that until now. So that's awesome. And also, I think that the implementation of the rudder is fantastic as well. I love the way that they did the just the, I guess, the sensitivity of walking and running and turning and going backwards. I felt that it was really well implemented and super intuitive. How did you feel about the Wizards with the rudder?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you with the moving forward and back, the speed that we didn't have just playing the regular game itself. And as much as I love the game, it was kind of, I could only play it in small increments at first just because so much movement and doing the hand gestures would get rough for me. So I'd only be able to do it for smaller increments. And then I'd try to do a little more and more each day. But with the rudder, it was easier for me to go longer because I was just having to just barely concentrate on the hands, and then the feet just came naturally in there. But yeah, being able to go slow around, look around the corner, and then move fast and get away if you needed to, or go straight back while you're conjuring up a fireball to throw while you're still moving back and not having to point back at the same time.
This was a really good example, I think, in every possible way of what the rudder could bring to games, because it kind of touched on almost everything that we would do. Like it had running and turning and then having to backpedal and then like actually like use your hands completely independently to like, shoot stuff. So there was that aspect, but it also had puzzles with like pressure pads and staircases that you had to walk around, and then even had teleportation where you had to do big jumps and then continue to run and turn, and it was just, it really was one of this and Honor and Duty were two of the games that were like high speed, high movement, and I was able to really see like, can I do this? Like, is it going to have the what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of the resolution in its control to be fine tuned enough to be able to like swerve through small spaces and go up ladders. And the Wizards was one really, really good example of what I think we can expect with like Sorento and future games. So, the Wizards, like, Hand clap. Well
yeah,
done.
some of the best movement schemes between the moves, the teleportation, and the rudder. Just by far the best combination of all three that I've seen. Great stuff.
They answered, Vertigo Home is a tunnel runner. You fly through a tunnel that you rotate with your head in order to dodge obstacles. It has been described as a high-paced psychedelic attack on your visual cortex. And we asked them, what opportunities does the 3D rudder bring to Vertigo Home and ultimately to the PSVR user? And they answered, the rudder takes the steering of the tunnel away from your neck and moves it to your feet, which feels tricky and a bit weird at first, but with time this is a whole new experience that is utterly addictive. And we asked them, foot-based controls for VR just seem to make sense. Do you see this style of controller in one shape or another becoming a part of VR's continued evolution? And they answered, definitely. I even think it might spill over into non-VR gaming as well. It is a cool way of giving input to any game, VR or not. It was originally designed for architecture/3D modeling, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And we asked them, as a gamer, how has been playing with the 3D rudder felt? And they answered, pretty weird at first. Your body is simply not used to doing business like that. But after a while, the body figures it out and then it becomes easier. And yet, after a while, it becomes really intuitive and you'll be in the flow. It expands your world. What does this mean for the average PSVR gamer? And they answered, every PSVR gamer should buy one, in my opinion. Save your money by not buying highly advertised VR games that only have impressive trailer videos, but you already know will not deliver. And get a rudder.
And our next guest is Matt from Tribe Toy, lead designer and co-founder. Matt, for those who do not necessarily know of your game, can you tell us what Bout of Blood is?
Sure. Bout of Blood, the player is a captain in an airship in a reality show. And basically they're flying their ship, commanding the crew and trying to manipulate the rivals, plot betrayals, forge alliances in order to not get voted off as they go throughout the season.
Awesome. Yeah, I've said this before on my channel, but it's one of my favorite PSVR games, and it made my top 15 games. Super awesome. If you guys haven't checked it out, then you need to check that game out. Think Borderlands meets Star Trek Bridge Crew, but you're the only one in control. Anyways, Matt, with the 3D rudder, obviously why we're all brought here together, can you explain, I guess, for us what kind of benefits the 3D rudder brings to Bout of Blood, and I guess also ultimately for the PSVR user?
Sure, absolutely. When 3D rudder approached us and basically people are very split, had been very split between liking the DualShock controller and liking the moves. A lot of people felt that the moves were better for aiming, better for commanding the crew, but they missed that thumbstick for flying the ship. And they and the 3D rudder is sort of like a thumbstick, that you can use with your feet while you're using your hands and aiming with the moves and stuff like that. So I think that for players that like playing Bout of Blood with the moves, the thumbstick really adds, the 3D rudder really adds that, ability to fly your ship a little more naturally.
Yeah, totally. That's how I felt about it too. It's kind of the best of both worlds because I was definitely a move player. I just loved being able to freehand the gun and all the ship allocation aspects too just felt more natural being able to do it with hands. But it is a lot on the controllers when you're trying to turn your ship left and right to get the guns aimed and lower the shields from attack and all that. It just can be a lot when you're trying to manage resources and shoot incoming drones. So yeah, the 3D rudder seems like a natural fit to just get some of that off your hands. So Matt, as far as 3D rudder implementation goes, how did you guys find the process, from more of a technical standpoint, I guess, for developers that might be watching this?
It wasn't too bad. They sent us the rudder, and the actual implementation, I think, only took us a few days. So, a few days we had it up and running, and then it was all just about tuning the gameplay.
Awesome. Yeah, that's kind of what we've been hearing. So that's good news for gamers and 3D rudder, I guess. Question for you though, foot-based controls in VR, they just seem to be they seem to be a natural fit, not only for immersion and also, gamers' sicknesses with just, with movement, locomotion being tied to the feet might make more sense for some people. Where do you see, I guess, foot controls going as we move into the future of VR? Do you see that being something that moves forward or just evolutionizes? Kind of what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll continue. Like, for me, like having hands in VR is just, an amazing experience, right? It's like it just feels so natural, and being able to kick and see your feet, and like that's just the next step, right? Feeling like you're really walking, feeling like you're really, being able to just turn by moving your body. Those are all things that I think that will continue. And like I think that the end goal is, how do you walk forever, right? And like we all have limited space in our homes. We all have like, I know my VR room is not big enough, right? It needs to be much bigger. And like, but with foot controllers, they can help bridge that gap and sort of make it, so you can like feel like you're walking, even though you might not have the space. And I hope that continues to evolve, and eventually we can walk in a straight line forever in our house and feel like we're really walking. That'd be great.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point there. I used to joke with friends because us in the VR world, we always want more immersion. So whatever peripherals, whatever devices that is, but I don't think people really want to be able to run and walk in games, because I was joking with a friend saying, can you imagine playing a Battlefield game and running for 10 minutes to get to A, and then you get shot and you have to start all over again? By the time you actually got into battle, you'd be just sweating buckets. I don't think people really think that through. So I think the rudder definitely is probably more in line with where we're going to go as far as that goes. And that brings me to my final question for you. I guess as a gamer, how have you found using the rudder with your game, with other games? I guess, do you have any experiences you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I think one of the best things about it is just that you can fly while using your hands, right? And like you can sort of feel like you're leaning into the turns and feel like you're moving in that, with your body. I think that, it's a great first step toward like that kind of controller, and I'm sure they'll, that the next iterations that they work on and everything else will be even better. So it's really fun,
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to use our rudders with Bout of Blood, easily one of my favorite PSVR games to date. And with that, I'm going to bring the conversation over to Jason here and discuss a little bit about our own personal experiences with Bout of Blood with the 3dRudder.
For Bout of Blood, actually, I never used to be able to play with the Move controllers. With the rudder, I actually was able to play with the Move controllers too as well. It took me a second because I was trying to fly the ship, and I think I'd just come from playing a game where I was actually moving back and forth, and basically I just started going all over the place. But it took me a couple minutes. I got adjusted to it, and I was flying the ship around, grabbing the gun, shooting people getting close to me, and yeah, it was great. I was actually able to fly around and do stuff. It was a great experience for me, especially.
How did you feel in regards to like sensitivity? Do you feel like they had that dialed in?
Yeah. I mean, it was good too. So I didn't really have to do too much too. So it was very light in case I was having a bad day. You know what I mean? With the back and stuff like that, I could still play the game because it was super light and it's super easy to do. So yeah, awesome. It definitely wasn't bad at all. It was a great experience.
Personally, I was actually surprised with how much I actually enjoyed the rudder. Like I said, I used the Move controllers, and a bunch of other tubers in our community seemed to be split down the middle. Some people were DS4s only, and some people like swore by their Move controllers. I love the Moves. Like I said, lots to do on your hands, but I still got very, very competent with it. But when I threw in the rudder, I realized that I'd actually been leaning when I was playing the game anyways, because you feel the giant movement of these huge airships, which was my favorite thing about the whole game, was that sense of the weight. And when I found myself naturally leaning when I had with the rudder, and it just made for a very, very cool experience of feeling like you were really shifting weight with the ship. Something that you wouldn't necessarily have been as aware of, I think, when you were just using your hands.
Mind Labyrinth VR Dreams by Frost Earth Studios. We asked them, for those who aren't familiar with Mind Labyrinth VR Dreams, tell us about your creation. Their answer was, Mind Labyrinth VR Dreams is a meditative experience filled with emotions and powerful feelings. Here, players are able to experience gorgeous environments with original music composed by Oscar-winning composers, all while taking a journey filled with mystical creatures and hidden refugees along the way. It's that kind of game you want to play if you want to try something truly unique in VR. We asked them what opportunities does the 3dRudder bring to Mind Labyrinth VR Dreams and ultimately to the PSVR user. They responded, the 3dRudder enhances the locomotion in our game. You're able to walk while having your hands free, which means you can easily interact with the environment or shoot the runes while still being able to walk. You can walk and look in different directions and is currently one of the most immersive ways to play this game now. We asked them how easy was implementation of 3dRudder support from a technical standpoint. Their answer was, the implementation of the 3dRudder was quite straightforward. It was as quick as 1 or 2 days of work to have a first working build where we were able to walk around. A few more adjustments and fine-tuning was needed, but overall, it's really a quick implementation. We asked them, foot-based controls for VR seems to just make sense. Do you see this kind of controller in one shape or another becoming a part of VR's continued evolution? They answered, it seems likely, at least for the current and next VR generation, where there doesn't seem to be a better way to do locomotion in VR. The 3dRudder is probably the most comfortable and obvious solution right now. We asked them, tell us about your specific challenges as it relates to VR gaming and how the 3dRudder has impacted you. Their answer was, VR gaming can be quite frustrating sometimes because you have amazing worlds to explore, but you feel like you're stuck with teleportation, blink motion, or artificial locomotion. But with the 3dRudder, you can actually walk around easily now. We asked them, what does this mean for the average PSVR gamer? Their answer was, it means that the average PSVR gamer will be able to experience a better sense of freedom while exploring new worlds in VR, and they'll be able to use their hands easier to interact with the environment because they'll not be busy pushing buttons just to move.
And Jay, let's talk about another game with rudder support. That is Mind Labyrinth VR Dreams. It's a game that I said is all about relaxation. So anything that kind of takes away the thought process of playing the game, I think works in its benefit. And so the rudder taking over the locomotion in that game was really nice. And they added a run feature in that game a while back too. So the addition of rudder support just makes a lot of sense now, because now you can just kind of cruise around these super neon-esque worlds and kind of it's easier to get lost in it, I guess, that's how I felt. What about you?
For me, yeah. Originally, the game was, I mean, it had great intentions, but the movement controls were really kind of rough when he first started on the game. He went from just kind of a click turning, and then he added some different support in there. Both of those movements kind of got a little confusing for me during the time, which kind of made me put the game down at the time, even though I loved it. It was a great, relaxing game. But with the rudder, that completely changed the game for me there, because then it was just, like you said, a walking through experience versus, you know, trying to point back and forth and trying to get here to there. And when you're trying to relax and learn and get into like a meditative state, it's kind of hard to do that when you're getting frustrated with the movement around there. But yeah, being able to look around the environment and move around at will, turn, go back and forth. I mean, it was just, it was great. It was like, it was like wherever you went, like leaving my house and going out, walking in the forest, bridges or different areas like that. It was great. Great experience.
And I think it's mindless. Just I want to walk and I walk. I mean, it totally makes sense. And that's the nice thing about the rudder when it comes to games where you're walking, is it just makes sense. You just kind of do it. Eventually, after a few minutes of learning, you just do. I walk forward and I lean forward with my feet. And I think that's probably something to take away for those watching at home, is that even if this game is not really for you, because it's not for everybody, it's it's very much a meditative type of experience. I think the big thing to take away is just the implementation of it and just seeing what the rudder adds to games with like that are, you know, walking simulators. Those are my quotation marks for those wondering. And you know, so games like Eden Tomorrow and things like that, and even Robinson's The Journey, I think it's just a really good visual example of what the rudder could do to future games and future support. So our next guest over to stage right here is Andreas, the one-man show over at Frozen Gun Games. Andreas, thanks for joining us. And for those who are unfamiliar with your game, can you give us a little bit of a rundown of what Pirate Flight is on PSVR?
Well, first, thanks for having me over here and for building this fabulous, awesome stage. I was just blasted away when I saw it. And Pirate Flight is a little dream of mine because I love flying a lot. And when I got kids, I promised my wife no flying or dangerous stuff anymore. So I said, well, I have to fly in VR. I bought the PSVR, but there were no flying games out there. And after a few mobile games I did, Freeze 2, I was a bit disappointed with mobile. And I said, well, building a PlayStation 4 game, a PSVR game on my own would be a really big challenge. So I never run away from challenges. That's the reason why I have kids. And yeah, I thought if I do a project like this, it should be a dream project. And as I love flying, I wanted to build a flying game. And so I built a little airplane. I sat into it and I flew around in the first prototype, and then I built on that, and I put dragons in to race, and I put balloons in to pop them, as demonstrated here. And as I'm no artist, I bought lots of stuff from the Unity marketplace, and I somehow just fit it together. It's a one-man project, so don't expect a AAA title. It's just fun, and it should be perfect for beginner VR gamers. So it isn't too hard, and it has lots of comfort settings.
Yeah, totally. It gave me a little bit of a nostalgia effect, reminding me of the old Diddy Kong racing on the N64.
I love that game. Thanks a lot.
I was definitely feeling the influences there, so that's very cool. As far as the 3dRudder goes, I guess, can you kind of elaborate on what the 3dRudder brings to Pirate Flight and what kind of, I guess, opportunities that brings to the PSVR user?
As everybody who tried out a PSVR or VR flying game might know, there's something like simulation sickness that's based on vaction, that is movement that is only simulated. Your eyes think you're moving, but your brain doesn't catch up, or your inner ear. And so some people can stomach it, and some really cannot stomach it. So they don't puke around all the time, but it's still, they don't feel good playing the game. So I put lots of comfort settings in, but for some people even that didn't help, because you're flying with a thumbstick and controlling your airplane, and that's not natural. I cannot walk with my thumbs down the road. I can't. Some people might. And the PSVR 3dRudder controller gave me the opportunity to control my airplane using this new controller, and it's more natural. When I want to turn to the left, I just turn with my feet, and my body is kind of used to turning left when my feet turn left.
Well, thanks so much for touching on that, because that was something that we've been talking about as we've been speaking to people about the 3dRudder usage, and just that is wondering how it affected people who might have motion sickness, because our belief is kind of that you're instinctually kind of lean and turn when you turn in real life, and so the 3dRudder kind of plays on that kind of correlation with your brain. So that's really awesome to hear that you had the a similar situation there. Foot-based controls for VR just seems to make sense, especially as we look down the road of VR adoption and for immersion. I guess I'm just wondering from the creator standpoint and the developer standpoint and your experience with VR as a whole, where do you see, I guess, foot controls in the future for VR, or just, I guess, controls in general, as we, continue to grow into VR?
Well, there are, I guess, two kinds of people. People who are using special controllers for special purposes, and people who aren't. And if you're used to that, if you buy a new controller, a cool flight stick and throttle and foot pedals for Flight Simulator a few years ago, you just love it. You cannot do it without it anymore. And other people are afraid of cables. There are already so many cables lying around with a PSVR. One more cable? Why? Why should I do it? And it costs money, and why should I spend money? So I guess the best way to put people into it is just to let them play it at a location or by friends, because when they did it, they won't miss it anymore. They will not want to play without it. I, for example, would love to have games like Farpoint or Skyrim VR on the PSVR supporting the 3dRudder controller, because for me it's really natural to control the stuff with my feet. It took me about, let's say, 20 to 30 minutes of testing. The learning curve was not steep at all. And after that, it felt natural. And from now on, I just would love to play these games, and I really hope that the other developers will put support for the games, for the 3dRudder, into the games, because it's not much you have to do as a developer. They make it really easy for us.
Well, that was easily the best answer to that question. That was.
I don't get paid for this. I'm not.
That was. But well, we're not here to. Yeah, well, yeah, we're not biased here either. We're just talking experiences. But that is easily my favorite answer to that question. How have you found the 3dRudder as a gamer, playing other games or your game specifically? Just, I guess, if you could elaborate on kind of like your experiences as a gamer and not just the developer.
As a gamer, when I played my game, because I played it most of the time, if you're developing games, you don't sadly have too much time playing other games. Of course you should, because you have to know what other people are doing and where they are pushing the limits. But mostly you play your own game if you're a one-man show for testing. And I played it a lot in comfort mode, where you have, you can of course pitch the airplane, and you can of course yaw, that's turning on the spot. But in comfort mode, there's not much roll for the airplane, because then you really feel sick after a short while. And for that, the 3dRudder was nice to use, but it was not essential. But then the community and all these PSVR YouTubers, these hardcore gamers, told me, come on, guy, we're not all pussies or wimps, or I don't know what I'm allowed to say. And please give us please give us a hardcore mode without any blinders at all, and with full roll and full control. So I put in aerobatic mode. And this is, you can do 360s, turns, loopings, aileron rolls, whatever you want. And I, as a pro developer, I had to record a video for the PlayStation VR store. And oh boy, it was really hard for me, because my stomach, I couldn't stomach full aerobatic mode. And when I put in the 3dRudder, it got easier for me. I was able to fly a longer time. I still feel some uncomfortness. Is there a word like uncomfortness? No, I didn't feel comfortable all the time, but it worked. I was able to record the video. And so for me, I was a perfect test case. I could see on myself that 3dRudder controls helped me and worked out. And that's one of the reasons, because I love playing in VR and looking into other games, that I wish that other developers will support it. Because for me, it will be easier to get into more hardcore games and enjoy games like Skyrim without doing like the 90-degree turns and stuff like that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, well, another great answer there, Andreas. Yeah, what we spoke before when we were speaking to a previous developer there. The nice thing about a game like Pirate Flight is we get to use the rudder as a rudder in your game. So it's definitely a perfect fit. And I am one of those gamers who definitely wants the full-on experience, all comfort settings off, all speed turned up to. And so I really appreciate your commitment to the community and making this game everything for everybody. So thank you so much for being with us, Andreas. That's all we have for you tonight. But again, thanks for joining us. And yeah, just thank you for making a game for gamers.
Thank you so much, Beck, and thank you again for this stage. I feel really honored. Bye.
And with that, I'm going to look over to my partner on stage right here. I guess that's actually probably stage left. It's Jason Livin. Jason, what was your experience with Pirate Flight and the 3dRudder?
Pirate Flight was great. I tried it before just with the DualShock. And with the DualShock, it was a fun game, but I mean, with the rudder, it was a completely different experience. For me, the Vertigo hit a little using the DualShock on there, but like he was describing there, with the actual rudder itself, it wasn't bad. I can actually control the plane. I can go faster or slower depending on the speed I wanted to. It was a perfect setting for it there, so it actually made it really enjoyable. So yeah, I was flying around. Took a few minutes to get used to it there, of course. But
so you did find a little bit of motion sickness for yourself?
Previous to the DualShock, previous to. So I feel his pain exactly what he was talking about there with it too as well. But the rudder definitely helped me out in that game with that. It was a plus for sure.
So my experience with Pirate Flight is a little different than yours. I mean, I found it fairly tame. Now, for those of you watching who haven't played the game, when I talk about it being like a Diddy Kong Racing, I really do mean that. Though it is a very simple game. It's easy to jump into. It would be good for people who are not big gamers or young kids. It really is a jump up and you just kind of fly and race and shoot things, and it's a very simple game that I found a little boring before Andreas introduced some of the more extreme controls, because I was looking for that feeling of flight like we've seen in Ultra Wings and Ace Combat 7. And so to me, I was just like, give me those feelings in my stomach. That's what I want. Make me feel VR. So that's where I'm coming from. I wouldn't say it's so much for me, it wasn't like a game changer because I wasn't looking for it from the comfort settings. It's not like certain games like like Wizards and I'm going to imagine Space Junkies, where it's just like, I can't imagine playing this game without it. But it's definitely just, it's nice to have it. Again, talking about the casual gamer jumping in, the rudder is easier for people to understand than giving them a controller and trying to explain 10 buttons. So that's great. I thought it was implemented nicely.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, he did a great job.
That's what's so great about VR in general. It's like the Wild West. I mean, it's never in flat gaming have I seen a developer come around and be like, we added a brand new controller and multiplayer and we changed the entire physics engine. Like, that's the type of stuff we get in VR. It's awesome.
Our next game is Tella Frag VR, developed by Anshar Studios. And we asked them, for those who aren't familiar with Tella Frag, tell us about your creation. And they answered, Tella Frag VR is a fast-paced arena shooter in VR, set in an alternative universe where the Roman Empire never collapsed, and you step into the shoes of a new breed of gladiator on the road to becoming a champion. We want Tella Frag to have the same vibe as classic arena shooters such as Unreal Tournament or Quake. As is the case with this type of first-person shooter, the game has different arenas and weapons adapted to the capabilities of VR. And we asked them, how easy was implementation of the 3dRudder support from a technical standpoint? And they answered, the dev plugin provided by the 3dRudder team is very easy to integrate with the Unreal Engine. Even in the advanced development phase, it didn't cause any problems. From the implementation side, 3dRudder can be treated as an ordinary gamepad for the programming side. And we asked them, foot-based controls in VR just seem to make sense. Do you see this style of controller in one shape or another becoming part of VR's continued evolution? And they answered, the first attempts to implement these types of devices appeared several years ago, but until now, this type of controller was, in my opinion, associated mainly with events or arcade rooms. The obvious advantage of the 3dRudder is its size, mobility, and price. This equipment is available now at your fingertips so anyone can play at home. And we asked them, as a gamer, how has been playing with the 3dRudder felt? And they answered, at the beginning, the oval-shaped bottom does not give a sense of stability. However, it takes just a few minutes of training to get a grip on what's going on. Both strafe, jump, and turn do not cause any problems. Next up was Beat Blaster Operation Warcade from Ivanovich Games. We asked them, for those who aren't familiar with your two current PSVR titles, that of Beat Blaster and Operation Warcade, tell us about your creations. Their answer was, Beat Blaster is a VR game about shooting and running where everything happens to the beat of the music. Operation Warcade is a VR shooter inspired by the classic war arcade, Operation Wolf. We asked them, what opportunities does the 3dRudder bring to Beat Blaster, Operation Warcade, and ultimately to the PSVR user? They answered, with Beat Blaster, it offers the most intuitive way to move in VR. It works perfectly because the game was designed with this device in mind from the beginning. There's no rotation, but with your feet, you can move wherever you want, leaving your hands free to concentrate on shooting, just like you would in the real world. We asked them how easy was implementation of the 3dRudder support from a technical standpoint. Their answer was, the integration was really very simple. We work with Unity, they sent us the plugin, and it's all quite intuitive.
Game over.
We asked them, foot-based controls for VR seem to just make sense. Do you see this style of controller in one shape or another becoming a part of VR's continued evolution? Their answer was, it's a big step forward actually, especially on the PlayStation VR, where there is the added problem that the moves do not have motion joysticks. There are other solutions for moving with your feet in VR, but they are not intended for the home. 3dRudder is comfortable to use, occupies very little space, and it is affordable. I think it's a must-buy for all PlayStation VR fans.
And Jason, let's talk a little bit about Ivanovich Games and their two contributions to the rudder, that of Operation Warcade and Beat Blaster. First off, I guess it's Beat Blaster. This game was actually developed from the ground up with the rudder in mind. They I guess got a heads up on that rudder and thought it was a brilliant fit. For any of you who have played Beat Blaster, you know that has a little bit of learning curve as you kind of get used to the quick controls. And for me personally, I found that the rudder definitely worked with that. It was a little sensitive, but again, just with the nature of the game, once that you kind of got used to that, it was really nice to not have tracking locked to a controller or a head. That made a big difference for me, just so you could like properly look around where your escape route was going to be. I don't know, how did you find it?
For me, I originally played it with the moves, and I played it with the aim, but doing with the moves and the rudder definitely was the best for me.
Yeah.
It took me a few minutes to get used to. It was real easy to move around. It was like floating around on a hoverboard with guns, basically, for me. So sometimes I would drift off and forget and move into the wall, but then I got used to it, and then I was moving through like a pro. And then the way you can increase the speed or decrease the speed by moving it forward and backwards, that's brilliant.
And you brought up a great point there, actually, is the feeling of a lot of these games. You know, if you're walking or flying an airplane or something, the rudder it was like a cool controller. But in this game, you're right, it did feel a little bit like my Back to the Future dreams of being on a hoverboard, because it felt like you were kind of surfing through the level. That's just kind of the nature of the movement in the game. And and I agree with you as well. Two move controllers was my preference. Actually, it's one of the few games where I would say I preferred that over the aim. The aim was nice for aiming, but it was just really hard to make up for having two guns. So throwing the rudder into the mix kind of gave us the best of both worlds. And then, so the other game that they did, they just added rudder support to would be Operation Warcade. Not much of a game changer here. Basically, for those of you who have played it, all the vehicle levels, helicopters, planes, jeeps, trucks, whatever that they had you in, the rudder kind of helps add a little bit of superior control to that, especially when you're using the moves and you don't have the analog sticks on the aim. So helped the game, felt better with it, but definitely not something that I would necessarily like pick the rudder up for. It's just icing on the cake, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I mean, it is, like you said, only for the vehicles in there, because the rest of the game is just kind of scrolling in the old arcade fashion there.
Yeah.
Which is a great game, but yeah, also when you're in the vehicles, if you have a couple weapons, you can still control those and do that, or even in the jets, you can control how fast and slow you're going there and everything else, which is really neat. So yeah, definitely it enhances, but you're right, it isn't the extreme game changer there on that game there, but it definitely does enhance it.
And Jay, speaking of another game with great locomotion, let's talk Honor and Duty. Now, for any of us out there who have played Honor and Duty, and that's many of us, we know that game was pretty much an everything, including the kitchen sink type of game when it came to movement options. So rudder support with Honor and Duty just makes a ton of sense. It also gave us the opportunity to have the same level of, movement and ease of locomotion that we did with the aim controller, but now using the two move controllers, which I think you really enjoyed. So I guess you might as well lead us in and kind of speak about your experiences with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried everything across the board for Honor and Duty, just because I wanted to try everything. First, I started off with the moves, then I went to the aim, which I rather enjoyed on there. And then once I tried the rudder with it, I first tried that with the aim, and it was good. It was good. But then once I tried it with the moves, oh my God, it was like being John Wick on the battlefield out there for me. I mean, that talk about a game changer with the rudder, just like you said. I mean, it is the definite game changer for this one here. I was able to duck and weave through bullets while blasting with two different guns on each side, or tossing a grenade, or shooting somebody else while stabbing somebody else while I was running forward, and being able to strafe and go backwards all at the same time. And that was that definitely that's a 2 thumbs up for you, Reggie, on that one. That was really easy to do, not cumbersome. Even for a guy like me that gets confused, easy to pick up and do. It was great stuff.
And I think that right there is kind of the one of the things that I love the most about Honor and Duty was anybody who watches my channel knows I'm a really big proponent of options. Give us the options to play the game the way we want to play it. And Honor and Duty, just like, anything from running speed to turning speed to different controller options. I still like the aim because I can't get past that. I love the feeling of holding the rifle, and I really wanted that still. The two-handed things just, it was cool, but it wasn't the way I played the game. I got so used to the aim controller. So for me, I liked the aim controller still, but then I used the rudder because what I did like is just being able to use the aim 100% as a gun, and I pretty much could let go of the analog sticks and just use the rudder. So that became movement, so feet movement, that made sense, and then it was just gun. And like I said with the Wizards previously, that the big thing about Honor and Duty was to test the rudder. It was kind of like, can I run into that building with that tiny door, spin around, get on that ladder or that staircase, and then like get up to a window and then back up and down the stairs, and can I do that fast enough and like still be competitive enough, because we've gotten so used to analog sticks movement like that? And the answer was yes. And it didn't even really, it took me maybe one house to get used to getting in and turning properly. It's fast. That is one thing. And you can tone that down. Yeah. But I love that it was fast. This is what I'm getting at. For me, being the type of VR player that wants everything maxed out, man, I could soar, just ripping through those houses and up the stairs, and I was uninhibited, let's put it that way, with the rudder. So it was nice. And even playing the more recent map of their warehouse type map, I think it's called the Tank Factory. Lots of ladders and stuff in that, and no problem. Implementation of the rudder right now is very much up to the developers. So across these games, we've seen things we liked and things we didn't like as much. I think the nice thing that Honor and Duty and the Wizards, the games that we keep coming back to, did really, really well was not only their base implementation being very solid, but also the fact that they gave us choices to tone down sensitivities and increase this and that, and really make the rudder experience a little bit more personalized for us, in our own VR capabilities. I think that's something I'd like to see more with the rudder, is if you're going to add it, let us customize the experience at least to a certain degree, because not everybody's going to be able to handle the full speed. But then there's those of us who are going to want to really rip with it. So I guess what I'm just saying is that implementation is like everything with VR right now, it's the Wild West as we try to figure it out. But that's something I'd like to see.
Our next game is Sorento, developed by Mixed Realms and Swagsoft. We asked them, for those who aren't familiar with Sorento, tell us about your creation. Their answer was Sorento VR is an action-packed VR game where you take on the role of a highly skilled cyber ninja with the ability to leap through the air, run across walls, perform backflips, and slow down time as you take out your foes with an arsenal of weapons ranging from katanas, guns, a bow and arrow, and many more. We asked them what opportunities does the 3dRudder bring to Sorento and ultimately to the PSVR user. Their answer was, the 3dRudder allows us to give players another axis of mobility, letting them use their feet to control their movement, speed, and direction, while letting them retain full usage of their hands to fire pistols, akimbo, use a bow and arrow, or utilize a different weapon in each hand. It also lets you perform strafing runs and expertly circle around targets once you get the hang of the device. We asked them, tell us about your specific challenges as it relates to VR gaming and how the 3dRudder has impacted you. And they answered. There are two specific challenges of working with the PSVR. That of the expectation that players will be able to game seated and the control scheme of the PSVR Move controllers. For the former, it means having to redesign parts of the game, example in combat, to ensure that it accounts for players being less mobile than their PC counterparts. The control scheme is another consideration, as the lack of a joystick, touchpad, or other form of analog control means having more rigid movement options. The 3dRudder helps us out in both of these regards by turning the limitations into a mechanic itself.
Today we have Adrien Lacier joining us from Ubisoft France. And Adrien, thank you for joining us. He is the producer of Space Junkies. And Adrien, we just have a couple questions for you based off of the 3dRudder. And for those who aren't familiar with your game already, can you just give them a brief description of what Space Junkies is?
Well, Space Junkies is a jetpack fueled joyride, a multiplayer shooter in outer space. Basically, you fly around, you dodge, weave, groove, and move through deadly orbital arenas with your teammate or on your own in 2v2 or free-for-all battles.
What opportunities does the 3dRudder bring to Space Junkies and ultimately the PSVR user?
Well, I think for the experienced VR users today, there's quite a number of different angles to look at. Rotations, particularly in a shooter, are critical. So actually smooth rotations, being able to turn. Now on PS Move, you don't have your sticks, for example. So now it allows you to do a rotation naturally with your feet. And same with vertical, going up and down. Because we're in these spherical battle spaces, the rudder will allow you to go up and down quite intuitively, so you can still concentrate on your aiming and shooting and not worry about multiple inputs and interactions on your hands or on the PS Moves. So it adds another dimension. Same with people with issues with certain people with issues with finger movement or accessibility. It also adds another layer for them.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And how difficult was it to implement on a technical standpoint?
We're lucky. We're based in Montpellier, France, and the guys from 3dRudder are just up the road. They're about an hour away, I think. So they just came into the studio. We sat down with one of our programmers. It took us about hour and a half to do a basic integration, and then it's obviously you take a bit more time to clean and test and all that, but the integration was really straightforward. It's very much plug and play. I think they've done a great job on that side of things. It's very easy to input and put the control structure in place, so that's been great.
That's awesome. And foot controllers are kind of becoming a thing within the VR community there. How do you see these impacting the future of VR, just as far as a new peripheral to use, as far as getting more immersed? How do you see that changing the future of VR?
I think in terms of everything in VR for a lot of us, been working on it a while. It's evolutionary. I give the example of a new controller. Like the DualShock controller was an improvement. The Wii remotes were a shift. The nunchuck and the Wii remote. The rudder is another form of interaction and a way to interact with a game. So all those steps will continue to evolve. So for us, that's important, and it also allows us to discover new ways how people want to play. we can have an idea of how we want you to play when we're making a game, but it's very much how you interact and how you use the rudder that will show us the light at the end of the tunnel. So until we see people playing, it's hard for me to say, is this the best thing ever? How can I use it better and better? It's a very much an iterative process, and I think the more peripherals and the more people who are doing stuff like this, the better.
That's excellent, and you guys did a great job with the implementation of the Move controllers there too as well. I'm loving that, but
awesome.
I'm waiting for your 3D rudder update too as well. I can't wait to see how differently that even changes the game for me, going from the DualShocks to this, and then using those two things in unison there. From a player standpoint, how has the 3D rudder been for you? I know you're saying it'll change on a technical standpoint of stuff there for people, but for you, what's been your experience with it there? What's been your...
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun because I think obviously our original prototypes for Space Junkies was, we started off on the HTC Vive, so we used the wands, and then we actually we originally started on the razors years and years ago, and a bit of tape and a bit of Scotch tape and stuff to get those, to bring your hands into the game. Then we moved to the Vive, then the Oculus Touches came out. And then we were kind of looking at PlayStation and the Moves, which were a little bit different because they didn't have sticks and things like that. So it made it quite hard from an input point of view or perspective and a design perspective to give a PlayStation Move user the same level of interaction, the same level of sort of reactiveness when they're playing a game. When we combine our control system with Move with the rudder, it adds another layer. So it means your rotations and your verticality. So when I'm playing, it's quite intuitive. So it adds another peripheral, but because I'm doing it with my feet, it gives me more room to maneuver like sticks, room to look with and aim and shoot. So it makes me a bit more competitive. That's basically what it does. So that's been my experience so far. I think one of the big things for PSVR players that we found was the smooth rotation, and actually that freedom of hands. Because with the DualShocks, what we found was although they were still competitive, there was a blind spot because you had to like on your we're in this sort of round circle, this spherical battlefield. So when you're on DualShock, you've got two hands on the pad. So when you're trying to aim sort of corner left or corner right, you can't go quite there because you don't have sort of the freedom of your hands to sort of aim, or a sword or whatever. Same with the shield. The shield, we had to lock it into a position, which is, so it made a disadvantage because normally your shield you can protect from the left, up, down, left, and whatever. So I think the moves have given the PS players a lot more freedom again, and that liberty to reload and the solar saber and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's been a good move. I just wish I would have thought about it before. So at the time we didn't really know how many people were using moves, and then obviously everyone was like, I want moves, and we're like, So you always forget one thing. You always forget something.
It's a tough one on that too, because you never know. I mean, some games can work a little with it, but yeah, the majority of people, of course, are going to have that demand for the moves out there, because that's, to them, everything, they don't realize sometimes how hard it is to integrate for you guys, especially for games that's been out there too as well.
Absolutely.
Plus Sony's restrictions with the movement, and then making sure you got to go through all those different layers of stuff there. So
exactly.
We appreciate you guys that you keep working. I mean, not only for the people out there in the community, but to work with Sony to better stuff for everybody out there too.
Absolutely.
As well. And you listening to the community and doing what you did recently, I mean, that's a big deal. Especially when the players know you're listening to them,
Well,
keep them happy,
we don't make
keep
it for
yourself
ourselves,
happy, right? Right.
Well, it's what we say. We don't make games for us. We make games for them. So if they're not happy, well, we're scuppered.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it. I'm sure other people do too. I'm not as hardcore on you guys if something goes out there. I know that it'll come on my end there. You know what I mean? But if the fact that you're hearing other people I've seen before, even bigger companies, they just won't listen to anybody else at all, and they're just kind of shy away. But you guys have been superb on every level. So thank you for being you. As far as the learning curve, For your game, for the rudder, it is, from what you described, doesn't sound like it would be too difficult to get used to if you're already used to doing those kind of movements on the joystick or with your hands with the moves eventually.
I mean, it's pretty intuitive. Rotations, like the up-down takes you a bit of time, but it's just a rewiring of your brain, if you know what I mean. Your brain just has to get over that first step. But it's very intuitive. That's the good thing about the rudder. It's quite a natural. You know what you're doing with your feet, so it's pretty straightforward. There's not much friction there for that. And that's why, again, that finding this simplicity is the hard bit in the first place, and I think they've done a good job at finding that simplicity.
That's excellent to hear. It's anything to help change the game for people, right?
Exactly. Well, yeah, absolutely.
The more immersive, the better. We love that kind of stuff. So thank you, Adrian, for your time. Really appreciate you answering these questions for us and everybody else out there. Thank you so
Pleasure.
much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
And that's it for us, guys, bringing to a close our very special episode of the PSVR chat show featuring all things 3dRudder. All the developers that have joined us and participated in this episode one way or another for all things rudder and supporting the rudder, supporting PSVR users with their implementation of this very unique and very much needed peripheral. That's it for us, guys, from the PSVR chat show. Thank you and good night.
And before you take off, guys, don't forget to enter to win for a chance to win a 3dRudder or one of the many games that we discussed in today's episode. To enter, simply leave a comment in the video and let us know what you would like to be entered for with a hashtag in front of it. Entries can be left on either the PSVR chat show or on Shuckhead Gaming's channel and will be accepted until July 20th, 2019. Winners will be randomly selected and announced in an upcoming video exclusively on the PSVR chat show. So make sure to subscribe to the PSVR chat show and hit that bell icon so you don't miss out.